ridiculous. Welcome back. As many of you guys know, I'm a law enforcement trainer and instructor. I train and instruct military and law enforcement all across the nation on various law enforcement disciplines to include constitutional law, case law, patrol tactics, use of force, investigations, taser instructor, etc. And, most of you guys know that. But what a lot of you guys may not know is I actually started policing. I got first certified in the state of Oregon through DPSST, which stands for the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training. And Oregon is where I first learned to become a police officer. That's where I got my first exposure to law enforcement. And unfortunately, seeing the Salem police officer in this situation is nothing new for those of us that have been in Oregon for any period of time. Oregon is a completely different, totally different environment. It's a different environment than any other law enforcement setting that I've been in. And so we're just kind of break down some of this stuff. But this is one of the reasons why I ultimately decided to leave the state of Oregon, because they are it's not just soft on crime. In this case, you have multiple crimes occurring, and they do nothing to even respond to it. And so, coincidentally enough, when I first got certified as a taser instructor, I got certified through the Salem Police Department. So I went to the Salem Police Department, and that's where I first got certified years back as an Axon taser instructor. So I'm familiar with Salem, I'm familiar with the agency, and one of the things I can tell you is this officer is not alone. What do I mean by that? The Salem Police Department is a huge police department. If they needed to allocate 15 patrol officers to this incident and scene, they would be able to do that very quickly. This police department, it's a big police department. They have multiple personnel on patrol that are available. So if they needed to allocate 10 to 15 guys to this, if they wanted to, they could have. It would not have been an issue. But the fact that we see that the officer is engaged in a situation where he's extremely outnumbered just goes to show that the Salem Police Department had no interest in doing anything with this. Now, there's many reasons why the administration would give to why they wouldn't allocate resources to this and they wouldn't handle this. And that's fine because, ultimately they're going to have to decide. I'm not here to tell police officers how to do their job. I'm not here to tell administrators how to do your job. All I can do is speak the truth. All I can do is give you the facts. And ultimately, the taxpayers are who's going to ultimately be the victims and fitting the bill for all the decisions made by police administrators. And it's really interesting because all the other places that I've trained and people that I do consultations with, you can definitely tell that policing is way different across the country. So in Oregon, I guarantee you, the administrators of the Salem Police Department would absolutely give justification for why they decided to let this riot, this protest, whatever you want to call it, let the multiple 20 plus individuals who are in the roadway obstruct the roadway, creating an unsafe scene, causing an unsafe environment. And we can clearly articulate this, for example, with Michigan v. Long, where the Supreme Court states explicitly that roadside encounters are can be hazardous and are hazardous, right? This coincides with all the applicable case law. So the Salem administrators can say whatever they want, don't really care. They can justify it however they want, which I'm sure they did. And then you get to talking to police chiefs that are in the state of Texas, in the state of Nebraska, state of Kansas, state of Oklahoma, and they would have a completely different viewpoint and ideal as to why they would allocate resources to ensure that this didn't continue. So as you can see, again, I'm not here to tell a police administrator or tell a police department how to do their job. It's just very interesting when you look at the types of policing that happen across the nation. There are 1,000 ways to justify action or inaction. And that's kind of the one thing that I really want to hit home with this, because a lot of people want to think law enforcement is a monolith, and it's not, right? This is exactly how I would expect an Oregon Police Department to handle this scene. 110%. This is what I would expect. Now, if you came to rural Texas, rural eastern Oklahoma, I 100% guarantee you that would not be allowed. It would not be tolerated. And if the law enforcement side of the house didn't fix it, I guarantee you the civilian side, the citizen side, the everyday person side would handle it. So with that being said, let's look at some of the state law. Let's look at the different things that we're seeing happening here in the state of Oregon. So one of the first things that we can see here that I would bring our attention to is ORS 166.015, riot. A person commits the crime of riot if, while participating with 5 or more persons, the person engages in tumultuous and violent conduct and thereby intentionally or recklessly creating a grave risk of public alarm. And that would be a Class C felony. I believe, based upon just what we've seen in the short clip, we don't obviously know all the things that happened prior to and after, but it's very clear, number one, and again, we have this multiple places in Supreme Court case precedences. Again, we do know that in of themselves, roadside encounters are very hazardous. The Supreme Court in Michigan v. Long, they've established that. So even when we have a situation where you can call it a routine traffic stop, or in Michigan v. Long situation, we see that it was a person that was DUI, but he was trying to fix a tire, right? So he's not completely off the road with his hazards on. We can see that these encounters roadside where other people are driving are extremely hazardous. And we know, based upon the applicable literature, academic literature, whatever you want to call it, the state highway office, the federal highway office, Department of Safety, right? All these different organizations, conglomerates that collect and analyze this information will tell you that car accidents are a big deal. Pedestrian versus motor vehicle are a big deal, right? Roadside encounters in general are hazardous. And so it doesn't take much. Again, any lawyer, worth their salt would easily be able to articulate that when you have 20, 30 people that are in the roadway, holding signs, yelling, hitting on car doors, especially law enforcement, hitting their vehicle, getting behind them, yelling at them, acting like they're going to punch, whatever. It's very easy to articulate that's a tumultuous and violent situation, right? Again, any lawyer worth their salt can easily articulate that, just like I did. And I'm not even going into the nuances. I'm not even pulling. You give me 3 days and just allow me to drink my coffee and write a report, man, we'll definitely make it stick in regards to explaining the tumultuous violent behavior based upon behavioral characteristics, based upon applicable case law, based upon the science and literature in regards to therein. I use those words specifically like that for a reason. So, all that aside, it would be very easy. It would not be a hard nexus to show and articulate, yeah, this is 100% falls within the category of ORS 166.015, riot. So why is law enforcement not allocating resources? Well, what it really comes down to is if you look at who has the most power within a criminal justice organization, I would argue that, and this isn't my argument that I'm making, this is an argument that's made by many Supreme Court justices previous, the district attorney, right? They have the most power because they have the ability to even bring something to court. So just because I'm a police officer and I file charges, that doesn't mean that it's going to be adjudicated in court. The DA ultimately has the authority to decide if criminal charges are going to be pursued. And in Oregon, you're going to find, number one, they don't want law enforcement in general, in Oregon, in many places, are not even going to pursue any kind of action that might result in use of force if there's not a very high crime to go with it, right? Unfortunately, right? For example, in the state of Oklahoma, I can tell you emphatically without equivocation, if you come to Pittsburgh County, if you come to McIntosh County, if you go to Haskell County, and you go to a gas station and you steal a beer or you steal a candy bar, expect law enforcement, if they find you, they will use whatever force necessary to effect that arrest reasonably, right? So they're going to say, hey, I know that beer is only $2.15, but hey, that Natty High Life or whatever, that's a crime. You're going to be arrested. If you try to fight that officer, they're going to fight back, right? Even though that is what's called petty larceny, right? They're going to use force and they are going to take you to jail. And unfortunately, if it's a Friday, you're probably going to stay there until Monday when you can see a judge. In Oregon, that would absolutely not happen. It's just not going to, by and large, that won't happen because the way the risk mitigation factors work there, I don't know if I want to risk getting into a use of force. I don't think my admin would want me to get into a physical use of force over $2.15. So in this case, right, even though I believe we have a riot, if the district attorneys, for example, are not going to see it that way, what's going to happen? They're not going to. That officer's now putting himself in harm's way for now. Maybe it gets bumped down to a misdemeanor or a traffic infraction or something like that. It's just not. It's not worth. Its juice isn't worth the squeeze. Nor is an administrator, like we saw in this, going to allocate resources to get the officers there in order to make that highway safe. Again, don't believe me, believe your lying eyes. And so let's talk about something that the elected officials have tried to put in. So we see that there was another big incident in Interstate 5 in Eugene, Oregon, and it prompted Republican lawmakers to introduce a bill that would allow just district attorneys, right, to prosecute protesters and rioters for impeding traffic. So they have introduced House Bill 2534, again, sponsored by the Republicans, if that means anything, to modify the crime of rioting in its tumultuous violent conduct clause to include the use of motor vehicle or person's body to impede traffic, create a traffic hazard, or block the normal reasonable movement of traffic on the roadways. So essentially what they're trying to do is they're wanting to change the verbiage because district attorneys saw the verbiage and they're like, even though it's very easy to articulate that they are engaged in tumultuous behavior, the DA district attorneys didn't want to go with it, and they were open about not going with it. So that's when, again, don't believe me, believe your lying eyes. Here are the receipts. That's when the Republican lawmakers decided, hey, we're going to now introduce House Bill 2534, and we want to change the verbiage from motor vehicle to also a person's body to impede traffic, create a traffic hazard. So if you change the words, it's slam dunk at that point. I don't know how you wouldn't even articulate around it. So, Oregon obviously realizes there's a problem. There's people that are obviously upset enough to get lawmakers to even, care enough to address those issues. But that's what we're seeing. And so the biggest point that I want to make in this video is just show you that not all things, policing does not exist the same way in all places. How you go about policing is completely different based upon venue, completely different based upon where you're at geographically. It is what it is, man. Law enforcement is not a monolith. So there you have it. I'm curious to know, what are your guys' thoughts and opinions on this? If you saw this in your town, if you saw this in your community, if you saw this at, where you live, would you tolerate it? What do you think should happen? Do you think that protesters should be able to block public highways? Do you think they should be able to impede traffic? Do you think they should be allowed to hit your car as you're driving by? I want to know, what do you think? Tell me below in the comment section below. If you like this content, please like, share, subscribe. As always, guys, long live the Republic.